This is the story of an audio journey, a hi-fi escapade set in 2 European nations. As many of you know, I reported recently on high-end Munich, the finest audio show in the world, where hundreds of brands displayed as many products for thousands of rabid showgoers. After high-end Munich, I visited 3 Italian audio companies. Our leader in this journey and press junket, Steve Jain, co-founder and CEO of Fidelity Imports. We toured Tuscany, visiting SoulNote, who make amps, DACs, turntables, and speakers, Unison Research Electronics and Opera audio speakers, closing with Audiophile electronics and Alare speakers before a final glorious day spent in Rome eating and walking and sightseeing. Press junkets are nothing new in the camera, music, or automotive businesses, but Steve Jain is doing something different. He brings the press to these small, mostly family-run audio businesses where we learned their stories, saw their production, and heard their products. Steve brings the pursuit of hi-fi back to a personal level, where small companies do big things, needing only exposure to a larger audience to sell their very competitively priced products. Hello, everybody. We have Steve Jain in front of me. Is it Steve or Steven? Steve?
Definitely Steve. I'm only Steven when my mom's mad at me.
Okay, all right. And as mentioned in my intro, Steven is the co-founder. Steve is the co-founder and managing director of Fidelity Imports, which began in 2018. And Steve is currently in his warehouse outside of Philadelphia. And I wanted to do this because I feel like Steve is doing something so different from anybody else in the distributing end of high-end audio, or in audio period, which I've been doing since I've been doing a long, long time, for like 20 or 30 years. And I don't know anybody who's doing it like Steve does. The junket is one thing, the press junket. This is common in other parts of the industry, even though people think, oh, they get all freaked out when the audio people doing it. But it's also the finding these great new brands and exposing those to people and really putting your heart and soul into it. That's what's so different. I think it was Randy, Cheap Audio Man, was saying this has been going on a long time in the camera world as well. So. Yep. But what are you trying to do differently in the realm of, never mind taking a whole group, but doing a junket to all these different factories? But what is your angle on doing this for the benefit of the reader and the manufacturer?
Yeah, I think you're right. Randy and I have talked a lot about that. I've been, kind of borrowing ideas from the camera industry for a while. I feel very strongly that the camera industry is much more mature in the way in which it markets products to consumers. The camera industry needed to get better. If you think about, there were all these graphs and charts that were out there where the camera industry was shrinking at the same rate in which the smartphone was growing, right? So typical point and shoot cameras, the inexpensive stuff on the market, was dwindling just as fast or faster than smartphones were coming out, because people didn't see a need for that anymore. To survive, a number of the manufacturers got really good at marketing. And I felt like I was watching it happen. And I wasn't seeing the audio industry do the same thing. Let me give you a few examples, and then I'll kind of tell you what I've tried to embrace and what I've tried to do. I think that what we saw with the camera manufacturers was there was this massive shift that happened. And it centered a little bit around mirrorless, right? So mirrorless cameras, mirrorless sensors. You've got a situation where, for the first time ever, Sony became the #1 camera manufacturer above Canon and Nikon for the first time ever. But along with them also went Fujifilm and Leica, and to a smaller extent, Hasselblad. So you've got a shakeup in the camera world. And what I was seeing, because I'm a very terrible photographer, but I very much enjoy taking pictures, I was seeing that I was consuming a lot of content, Instagram, YouTube, and I was seeing that these reviewers were having personalities that were entertaining. Even when I was out of the market, when I wasn't shopping for something, I still would grab some coffee, start my morning, watch a couple videos, and then I'd get into my email and my phone calls and whatever else I needed to do. And it was because the personalities were good. And I always felt like with audio, we seem to be single serving. If you're on a hunt for a new AVR, there's a whole bunch of AVR manufacturers who are making X number of HDMI inputs and 100 watts per channel and blah, blah, blah. And so you go on this mission, you learn everything you can, you buy the product, you're out of the market. And I thought speakers were the same way with 2-channel, right? You're on a quest to get into analog, you want to buy a turntable, and maybe that's a bad example because you might have more than one cartridge. But once you got that turntable, you're gone now. Once you get a set of speakers or an integrated amp or separates, you've gone on this quest, you've watched all the videos, you've read everything you can at publications like Stereophile, Example, and then you're gone. And it's like, but if this is your thing, if this is your hobby, if this is what gives you a release, it gives you enjoyment, it's what you do when you want to pass hours of something that you enjoy, why should you only be involved when you're on a quest for a piece of gear? And so what ultimately that led me to was, of course, founding the company and then trying to curate a portfolio of brands that had stories to tell. And in many cases were designed by people and families and much smaller scale operations. So I felt like somebody needed to tell their story. And so we have a number of people at Fidelity that work with video. We have somebody that specializes in short form video, somebody that specializes in long form video. But it's hard for me because I'm an extension of the manufacturer to produce that content and for people to feel it's unbiased. And so the idea was, I saw, maybe the main, kind of point was, I saw an event where Leica had a number of influencers, a number of these YouTubers that I would watch all come to Wetzlar for a grand unveil of a new product. They weren't reviewing the product. They weren't telling you it's the best. They weren't telling you how it compared to another brand. It was, we've got something we want you to see. We want to put it in your hands and just create whatever you can. I thought, like, what if we did that? What if we were able to bring people to our manufacturers with their own voice and give them no rules, no regulations, we don't want anything, right? Ultimately, if I can't provide a canvas, a backdrop for which you to paint your picture in places like Italy with brands that are in such amazing, spots, then something's wrong with the whole equation anyway. So our main goal was like, show up. That's it. Do whatever you want. You can make nothing. You can make something. You can produce video. You can do photography. You can write about it, or you can do absolutely nothing and just soak it in. I have fond memories of reading magazines like Stereophile, and consuming content in a more analog way, because when I was originally getting hooked on 2-channel, we didn't have YouTube or Instagram, but there were storytellers. And I remember reading a lot about these products. I've always been attracted to products that come from old world craftsmanship, from storytellers, from families, and reading about the area in which the product is produced alongside the actual product, and then the people and what drew them to wanting to produce these products. And that part doesn't come out when you compare the number of HDMI inputs and how many watts per channel. Right. And it's all gone at that point. So that was my goal. And I was very happy when you said yes to come along on the journey. And we had a really great crew. I felt very strongly like more people should do this. I would be happy if competitors did this. Not upset. If more people did things like this, it would make me happy, because I'm very strongly under the mindset of the stories that have been written about audio dying and the industry shrinking and all this stuff. I don't believe any of them. People are consuming music more than ever. People are interested with hi-fi more than ever. Vinyl is back. CDs are coming back, right? I think that the people who are talking about it and the places where you can get an experience are the ones who need to change some of the thinking, right? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, this is still fun. This is still awesome. There's people making incredible things, and you should be excited. I'm excited every day to be able to feed my family by selling products that bring music to life every day.
Because it's really, you're the conduit, and that conduit hasn't been there before in the same way that I'm aware of. Because when you go and you meet these people and you hang out with them, and you feel them behind the gear. I mean, they're like at Unison Research, they had their entire line there. Was it Unison Research? The mother was there.
Yes.
Yeah,
That was, yep.
she was wonderful, and the two brothers, and you can't help but like become more involved. It's not just a spec sheet and somebody wrote a press release on something with nothing in it. You get a feeling who these people are.
Your word conduit is a good one. We like to say that we're an extension of the brands. Ultimately, they're not large enough to have, a US headquarters and presence like you think of, these giant multinational companies, right? Like big coffee companies or stuff like that have offices everywhere.
Right.
But they need a presence here. And what we try to do is we don't take a price sheet from the manufacturer and just, hey, here's the price and go try to place it at retail. We try to think about how we can help these companies grow and how we can, align them with retailers where consumers can get an experience and create digital assets that they can use to tell their story. We just want consumers to realize that for your money, there's a choice. You can buy from a bank-owned venture capitalists or a bunch of bankers that own these massive companies.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy a product from them. A lot of cases, it's not a bad product. But for the same money, you could also buy for a family. You could also buy from people who are thinking about, in the case of a number of the Italian brands that you met, Ken, they source all the products or the components for the product within a 5 to 10 kilometer radius. So they're trying to control the quality of the products and the sourcing of which the components come from, right? And so having that capability is huge, and it makes for a wonderful product.
Yeah, there's no way you can not meet these people, and then when you get the component in your house, like I'm going to get the Unison Research F6, I think it is. That new upgrade. Yes, and there's no way I won't be thinking about those guys, thinking about hearing that amp with their system, hearing it in my system. It's a much different it's a much more personal attachment to these things. And how can that not be a great thing for the manufacturers? Even though I'm sure this cost everybody a lot of money, you must see a payoff in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm not that good at business, if I'm honest with you. I mean, we don't look at an return on investment on this. We chalk this up to somebody's got to tell the story. So we can all sit around and hope and wish that people will do that, or we can do what we can to bring people to where the story is created and hope that they tell it. And we have to do it in a way in which we don't, sort of require anything, because then it's disingenuous. So our goal is just to put you in that place and hope that it's inspiring enough that you want to talk about it. I constantly come back to, and I've worked at a lot of large scale manufacturers.
Where did you work before?
I've been at everywhere from Panasonic, JVC, Denon and Marantz, Klipsch, and Pioneer and Onkyo. I don't even know if that order is correct, but what I would tell you is the more bankers that were involved, the less soul there was in the company. And I say this, and it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but not really. Bankers aren't cool. Like I don't want to hang out with them on weekends. I don't want to talk to them about audio gear. I certainly don't want to talk to them about jazz records.
Right.
So, what I've found is, just for me and my sensibilities, people are incredible to talk to when they talk with passion in their eyes, when they talk about the things that excite them. And I didn't see that in the more mainstream corporate world. I saw a lot of, how do we move more boxes? Last year we did 1,200. How do we do 1,400 this year? And that just kind of took all of the fun out of it. I get it. Again, I told you I'm not necessarily a great business person. But in the end of the day, I felt like I'm at an audio company. We make things that reproduce music, and people aren't talking about music. and people aren't talking about an experience or about even sometimes how good the product sounds. What they're talking about is how to move more boxes. And that just, as my career progressed, I got further and further away from the things that made me want to be in this industry. And so the second I had a chance to do something about it, I just decided with a buddy of mine, my partner, we said, let's start this company. Let's try it. Let's bet on ourselves. And ultimately, we've moved from ramen noodles to macaroni and cheese. We got the one with the sauce packet. So we're moving up the ladder a little bit. We don't believe that we're going to get rich, and nor did we ever go into it with those aspirations. But you can be rich and full of life by interacting with people you like, representing products that you're passionate about, that you want to put in your own home anyway. And if you can pay the bills and do that, that's a fulfilling life. And so that's what we've been after. I don't know if you've had this journey, Ken, but for me, the more into audio I got, the more I went towards the smaller producers and smaller manufacturers.
Totally.
You start sometimes with the big guys or the big mainstream mass market brands, and then you start to become more discerning. And then it's not just about the performance, it's about the brand, the people, the story, the location. And that for me was, as I kind of went into audio, that was my thing. I have some friends that I don't represent, of course, but people like John DeVore, people like Jonathan at Tone Imports, those guys gave me experiences with gear and products I never heard of, but blew my mind in terms of what audio could be. Again, doesn't mean better, but it sounded more right to me. And they gave me things to think about when I was shopping for brands to put into this portfolio. And so when we built the business, we also are very conscious about, why is the brand in the portfolio, right? Does it have a legacy of creating incredible products? Think about Michell, 1968 turntables in England, right? They've been building them all this time. Steve Jobs had one. Or are they a tremendous value, right? So think about Goldring phono cartridges, think about Acoustics, Acoustic Energy. These products punch way above their weight in terms of performance per dollar. And that's why they're in our portfolio. And across the portfolio, we have a lot of diverse products. Clearly the most science-based product we have is Perlisten. The amount of computer modeling that went into that product, the amount of time the engineers put into the science behind it is astounding. And the whole portfolio, there's reasons why stuff exists in it. And going to a show like Munich, seeing hundreds of incredible brands, getting to listen to them. It's not speed dating when we do trade shows in America where we actually have to present, but to go experience them and then see, is there anything that makes sense, could fit, aligns with what we're doing or not. But just being in that moment and getting to experience it was pretty awesome. And I think, some days I wake up and I think I have the greatest job in the world. We don't have brands that aren't ridiculously passionate about what they do. And I think you've got to experience a small portion of that, and hopefully more in the future as we travel around the rest of the world, bringing experiences to consumers.
And does this approach help you to get dealers and get them more quickly than the usual, I'll take the price list and get back to you thing?
Yeah, I think for us, we have a couple key tenets. So we ship everything to the dealer for free. We have no minimum orders, and we don't call dealers at the end of the month. We don't call them at the end of the quarter, and we don't sell any New York camera shops.
New York camera shops?
Yeah, New York camera stores, the guys that are all over eBay, they always have an open box product.
I'm not aware of that. Like, does B&H do that?
I don't think B&H does that, but there are a lot of New York camera shops.
Oh, wow.
Retailers who do.
Wow.
They always have an endless supply of open box. They're all over Amazon. They're all over eBay.
Right.
And for us, we want to be able to look at our retailers, and we really cater to small and medium retailers. we want to look them in the face and be able to say we have a clean channel, right? So you won't find our products on Audio Gone, on Amazon, on eBay. There won't be an endless supply of open box products. It's something that you take the everything ships to you for free, no minimums, no end of month, end of quarter calling, and no New York camera shops. No, none of those
uncommon,
guys that
those
are
4 things.
Yeah, and I think that's a large part of what is our success, right? We make it easy for the retailer to come on board with us. We don't push product down their throat, which we believe ultimately leads to discounting, right? We don't set these ridiculous goals for them. We try to work with what do they need. And what we found, and I think part of the key to the success is, there are very few retailers in our portfolio who carry just one brand from us. So what happens is they'll carry something, they'll be interested in one brand, and then they like the fact that there's no minimum. So today they bought a GoldNote turntable and a GoldNote, phono, and tomorrow they want to try a pair of acoustic energy speakers or Perlisten or Opera or Unison, right? So there's an ability for you to kind of shop across all the brands that we have, provided there isn't another retailer, right around the corner from you. And we make it easy for them. And that's been a key. Like, I would say we have about 600 active retailers across the country, and I bet there's less than 30 that only carry one brand.
What do they know in Europe that we don't know here?
The one thing I'll tell you that I learned when I was traveling around France and in the French market, having worked at another manufacturer, was that vinyl never left France. So while some markets there was a CD surge, and as that happened, vinyl went down. France, for example, vinyl never went away, and CD never took over. I think some European countries have always had a focus on audio. You also have to think about how much live music is a part of Europe, and thinking about how important that is to their culture. And you think about, Vienna, for example, and the influence of music, right? Think about Italy and the creation of some of the greatest violins that have ever been, on and on and on.
Yeah.
Right. Opera. There's so many stories. So I think the reproduction of music has always been important there. But I think the platform of, continuing vinyl, which more requires, doesn't require, but more people are likely to have a real 2-channel setup and playing vinyl than they are with just the CD player. And I think the other thing about it is they've found a way to elevate the experience. It's just cool. You go in those rooms, Ken, and I think you and I were talking about this when we were together. Was not one of our brands, but one of the brands that was showing at Munich had brought over a floor. And the floor had all of these interlocking tiles with like a gold trim around them. And they had walls that were wrapped in like a leather material mixed with, like one panel was leather. The next panel was what looked like an Alcantara, like a suede, automotive suede.
Wow. Right.
And I was just thinking about like the level of forethought, engineering, and the money they spent to produce an environment for you to experience their brand. I don't see that in America. I don't see manufacturers doing that here. I'd love to have the budget to do that. I don't. But seeing that over there, you just felt like you were more in their mood board, right? They immersed you in their brand. And I also think that the show there has a great idea of 2 days of press and dealer and 2 days of consumer. So breaking that apart is also great, because we can all go, myself and you, and get done what we need to do. And then we can also experience it from the consumer's eyes for the last 2 days of the show.
But what do you think is the biggest difference, if you had to cite one, between the US and the European audio market?
For the most part, there are a few things. In Europe, they don't have the same level yet of infiltration of Amazon and some really large scale retailers. So in a lot of cases, where you can purchase or where you are exposed to the brands is a little more of the traditional model of an experiential place to go hear and see audio. So I think there's a little bit of that. I don't know how long that will last, because as Amazon gets more powerful, some of these bigger, multinational companies get more foothold in the European market. Will that change the dynamic? I don't know. I think that the other thing is that the European market seems to be one where people are willing to spend a little bit more money on the quality of gear. They're less likely to buy from a brand they've never heard of that is not at retail or does not have a presence at these types of stores that they're familiar with. I also think, not to, point fingers, but, they don't have a Walmart, right? Or at least if they do, they don't have it at scale. So the idea that things could be had, while probably disposable, at a very, very small price is not really in their psyche.
And they don't have wonderful cell phone reception either. So you don't see everyone walking around like that. Which in New York, I'm constantly just stopping and waiting to see which way this asshole's going to go, or if they're going to bump into me. You saw almost none of that. But and they have less. The reception's not as good, so they don't seem to care as much. They're more involved in sort of being in the moment as far as being on the street.
It's not uncommon to have a 2-hour lunch in France or Italy. I mean, even in a business environment, I remember I was calling on a retailer, wonderful retailer in France, and we were putting together a program. I was working at a company that was exporting product to France and into the French market, and they said, "Okay, we go for lunch," and 2-hour lunch, wine. And at the end of it, I was like, I don't know how I'm supposed to work. Like, I'm not sure. And they just went, they were there till 6 o'clock. It wasn't like they were done at 3 o'clock, but
creating relationships.
They just kept going. So, one thing you'll experience, and I think one of the reasons why I love, products from Europe is there is definitely a slow down, relax. If it takes 5 hours to polish the cabinet of this cabinet, it takes 5 hours to polish the side of this cabinet. We're going to get it right, and we're going to produce a product that we're proud of, and we're going to put that in your hands.
How do we bring more people into hi-fi today?
It's a great question. Putting more people into audio, I think the market's still growing. I think that the idea that it's shrinking is crazy. It's bananas. I think that the addressable market grows every day, and we're just not telling the right stories. And I think that something I've been telling everybody about is this series called Dirt, from a company called Huckberry. You go to YouTube and watch this. I have no affiliation with them whatsoever. There's a guy who's a former snowboarder. He gets dropped somewhere, basically. They've got one on Ireland, Alaska. They're all over the world. And he meets with small artisans who produce certain things. They basically show him what they're doing, why it's important to them, why that craft made, bench made kind of product is important. He gets ingredients for different local produce or local protein. Then he has a adventure, and in the end, he has a meal with all these people he met. And there's lots of little stories and there's lots of little things weaved in there. But this company is, for all intents and purposes, a clothing manufacturer. They never say, oh, I'm warm because I'm wearing the Huckberry jacket. They never say, oh, I can go through this because I've got these boots on. They never point out the clothing. And in most of the time, they're not talking about clothing at all. In fact, they hardly ever talk about anything to do with fashion or apparel. And that philosophy is what I think we need more of in audio. I think we have got to find a way to do the backside, the history, the story, the location, the people, along with the review of the product. More emphasis on why you should care about the person who's producing the product and the environment in which it is. So I guess you could sum up what I'm saying as we need better storytellers. We have incredible stories. The industry has amazing stories to tell. And we're talking about specs and features and power, and it's just silly. And that's what I think. And I've been standing on the shoulders of giants, trying to steal some of that philosophy from Huckberry, trying to take some of it from what I see Fujifilm, Sony, Leica, and a little bit Hasselblad doing as well, and imparting that into the audio space.
All right, man. It was a blast. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Ken. Talk to you.